Hello there and welcome to the third video of the series. Here we are going to be talking about tiling so that we can, by the end of this video, we are going to have a landscape similar to this, or actually exactly this. So without further ado, let's jump into it. Now we are just going to open the material. And in the material we are going to replace the colors here with textures, because that's where we can actually use tiling techniques, because colors don't tile badly. So first let's just organize it, and we are gonna replace our main colors with textures. So let's just try that. So there is the noise node, or the noise texture, which actually blends two colors, and now we have a color and grass. That's not what we are gonna go with, it looks weird as you can see on the preview. So we are gonna actually bring in a second set of textures. They are not very different, but still different. They are all Megascans textures. And we are just gonna replace our textures. And in the path, I am actually not gonna lerp two textures together because I'm fine with one, and I'm just gonna plug the noise tiling into the UV. As for the rest of them, I'm just gonna replace all the colors with textures. So the primary and secondary texture for the grass, as you can see, they are slightly different in color. So we just plug them in. Same goes for the ground layer. And the same goes for the rock layer, of course. In the preview you can already see that it's starting to look pretty nice. And let's wait for it to compile. And it compiled. And I think it already looks pretty good. I mean, the grass is I still see the tiling, but it's not as bad as it was. Primarily because of the lerping with the noise texture. But on the rocks you can still see pretty bad tiling. Now if we open up the material instance, we can actually start messing around with the numbers, for example the grass tiling, and as you can, it does change. From close up it's not that visible, so we zoom out, and now the differences are pretty clear. For example, from up here it looks very good. From down here it's not really, so let's set it. And I think this is a pretty nice noise in the grass. Let's look at the rocks. Now the difference here isn't drastic, but I'm fine with that. It does matter. Every little change that hides the tiling is a good thing. So now we are just gonna copy the multiply and the texture coordinate node, paste it there behind our textures, and we are gonna create a new scalar parameter and connect it to the UVs. Now what this does is the same with the noise. It actually helps control the tiling, so you can set the texture to be bigger or smaller, and the parameter will help us do this from the material instance, so we don't have to change the material all the time. And in the preview you can actually see that while it's 0, it's like really big and you can't even see, and at 1 it's normal. So let's do the same with all of them. And it compiled. And let's just mess around with the grass. And you can see it changes the size of the grass. That's what tiling does. And now it actually really doesn't look that repetitive. I still see the lines. I don't know if you can. I'm pretty sure you can too. But let's actually check out what it does with the rocks. It's gonna be a lot more drastic than the noise. It gets bigger and bigger. Still see the tiling though. But now it's actually looking really nice, because we changed the value to a lower one, so the texture is gonna be bigger. The ground layer actually looks fine for me at the moment. But here let's just mess around with the rock a bit more because it's still repetitive. Now it's actually looking good. Later on you can actually mess with the tessellation, which will give it a real rocky feel because it will mess with the vertices. But let's save this for now. Now the next thing we will do is, well, connect up the ground because we haven't done that before. And we are just gonna mess around with that a bit too. It's not very noticeable, but you can still set it to your liking because every little detail can matter. Now, what we will do is that we are going to copy the perimeter and the multiply, because what we are going to do now is distance based tiling, which means if you are looking at it from further away, the textures are going to be bigger than from close up. It's a really good feature that you can do. It does have its downsides. For example, you have to double your textures for it. So we are setting a tiling in a distance, and we are going to leave the basic tiling alone. And now we are just going to duplicate that stuff. I'm not even sure in hindsight that it's really important with the ground, because that's not a big detail anyway. But that's specific to my material. For yours, it can be important. And we connect the UVs to the multiply that's controlled by the distance scalar perimeter. And now we are gonna add a distance blend node, which is what essentially is gonna control what size these should be. I mean, which range should it become bigger, and how wide the blend area should be. So I'm just creating two parameters for the two values, set the range to around 15,000 and set the value. Now in the preview windows of each texture node, you can actually see that the far one, or in the in distance one, looks a lot bigger. This is what we are gonna basically do. For the distance blend, we give it a distance and a blend range. And we are gonna use a lerp node, which will decide based on the alpha which texture to show. So we added a lerps because we are already using two textures for one, and now it's 4. We actually need 2 lerps here. And just connect them up. So the top one to the top one and the bottom one to the bottom one. And the alpha is of course going to be the distance blend. And now just connect the 2 lerps to our already existing lerps. And try to make it look nice and less like spaghetti. So we are done with the ground, and we are ready to do the same thing for all of our little textures. And as always, do not forget to rename the variables or parameters that you are using, because it is important. And it will give you a headache if you forget. And now save and compile. Let's see what the results are. So you can't see too much change at this moment. Actually, you can see it on the rocks. It looks a bit like morphing. But let's try it. And let's open the material instance so that we can see it better. And let's add some more values. I mean, not let's add, but let's change the values to something a bit more drastic. And you can already see that now we have a short range so that it's big from the get-go. And let's change the value to something more sensible. So if it's -1000, as you can see from few meters from us, it's a big texture, but directly in front of us it's a small texture. So you can see as the range moves outward, and there comes in the range, which controls how sharp the blend is, basically, so that how long of a distance should it fade from the small texture to the big one. Let's do the same for rock. You could see that so from this vantage point, let's see if we can make the textures look pretty big on the bottom, but still small where we are standing. And yes, as you can see, the texture where we are standing is still small, but down there, which is a higher distance away, it's really big. And as we get closer, the texture fades into the smaller texture. So let's set it back to something more sensible. And you can see that in the background the texture is bigger if you pay attention, but if you're in the game, that's not the thing you notice. Now the next step, which we are going to do, open up the gold, and there is the macro texture variation and the multiply there. We are going to copy that. That's the next step, and basically the final step of how to make the tiling disappear. This works really well with grasslands. It's not that noticeable on rocks, but still very much necessary. So copy those nodes in the comments and the multiply, go back into our landscape material. Let's give it some distance because it's a pretty big pile of nodes that we are just gonna paste here in a moment. And bring the multiply down. And we are just gonna multiply our base color. If you have normals and stuff, the one you multiply is the base color. So hook it up with the multiply and plug it into base color. And this is gonna be a very drastic difference. You will see it on the grass straight away, and it's gonna make it look really nice. Let's wait for it to save and compile. And you can already see it on the little square, but as soon as it finishes compiling, oh yeah, I think it looks awesome. And on the grass you cannot even see the tiling anymore. The noise, the macro texture variation just does the job beautifully. So let's actually paint a small little path, just because it looks nice there. I think it's really nice. It goes well with the landscape. And let's find it from our vantage point. In a moment, I got lost. And there it is. A bit of a skip there, but it looks nice. And as you can see, I completely forgot to delete those blue texts. That's for the fold image tutorial, which I did, but at some point I will get rid of that. Now let's lower our height a bit. So basically with the Z value or Z value on the, and with the value on the Z axis, just lower it, and now we have instead of mountains we have small hills. And in landscape mode we are just gonna create a few cliffs so that we can see the rocks and it looks a bit better. I'm just gonna use the flatten tool and start flattening away, and it looks really bad because actually our landscape is low resolution, so it's gonna be a bit ragged. But when we go over this with the smooth tool, it's gonna look a bit more natural. Not gonna be perfect, but I think it's gonna give it a bit more style. Like that, and smooth out the other side as well. And this is basically the point where I started this video. So thank you for watching, and in the next video we are gonna add foliage to both the blue scene and this scene so that we can make it look nice. Thank you for watching again, and see you next time.